It's your Friday daily delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are all having a great day out there today. Tremendous show coming up. Chris Hine from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a little bit to talk about the Karl-Anthony Towns trade for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, Keita Bates-Diop, number one pick, all that good stuff. We'll break that down, kind of the surprise level of the trade happening, the surprise level of when the trade happened, and what we think of this team going forward. I think I've been pretty clear about my feelings. I really like the trade. Chris, a little bit more nuanced about how this all fits together now for the Timberwolves. So we'll get to that here in just a little bit. Kirk Cousins at the end of the show. He had a huge night on Thursday Night Football last night. Kirk-tober picking up right where it left off. Fantasy football. Myself and sports editor Ryan Kostecka will get into that towards the end of the show as well. Preview the Lynx game tonight. So much going on. But first, what did I miss? I'm going to run through kind of a bunch of end-of-season correspondence that I got from Twins fans.
Time to check my social media, yeah. To see who loves me online. Hashtag blessed life.
First one comes from John. Most of these fans are mad, by the way, and I don't blame them. He says, next time you speak to Joe Polad, ask him if he knows that MLB stands for Major League Baseball, not Minor League Baseball. More than one reason for such a historic collapse, but cutting payroll after a playoff season is more than I can swallow. I will not attend another Twins game while the Polads own the team. Yeah, I don't know how much the payroll played into this year, but Twins attendance was down. I was surprised by that. It was down like a little bit from where it was last year, and it was certainly down from where they hoped they would be based on how well they did last year. It was just shy of 2 million, just kind of like what it was last year. They were only like 20 or 30,000 less than last year, but let's think about this. Last year, they were coming off a 2022 season where they collapsed at the end, but then they have this huge run towards the end of the season, get into the postseason, all sorts of supposed momentum coming into this year. They think they maybe capitalize on season tickets, all that enthusiasm, and then they just fall flat at the start of the year. They have a good, the months that they were good were important months for attendance, but they just never really got on track to the point where they wanted to, and they were short of projections. So that to me does speak to at least a little bit of, I don't know if it's fan dissatisfaction, if it's people wanting a different experience, doing different things, whatever, but they did fall short in attendance goals this season, and it sounds like they lost one fan, at least for good, until the Polads sell the team. Emailer Tom says, maybe they should fire some of the offensive analytic geniuses and let coaches teach without constant interference from suits that never played. You wonder why the pitching coach bailed? Baldelli serves as a real puppet in this organization. That's pretty harsh. I think it's indicative of how things are run. You might say puppet. Other people might say collaboration. So I think it's, I don't know if that's exactly how things get done over there, but they definitely do take a lot of input from data, from analytics. It's not necessarily a bad idea, right? Like you get the most, you get the eye test married with the data, things like that. But I do think in terms of hitting, at least, that sometimes too much information can be a dangerous thing. I think the pitchers are thriving with it to a degree, with the spin rate information, with knowing what pitches to throw, but they start out with the ball. They have kind of a clear head as this is happening. You overload a hitter with too much information and give them all this clutter in their heads for the 0.2, 0.3 seconds they have to make decisions in some cases on these pitches, you might be doing them a disservice. So I get it. I think maybe hitting does need to be more instinctive than pitching, but I'm not sure if I would go so far as to say puppet for Baldelli. I think he still does more than people realize. David, with a specific question from a different playoff game, says, my question is, why do MLB outfielders catch a long foul ball for an out with the runner on third base and less than 2 outs? I saw it happen at the Tigers-Astros game. Tigers swept the Astros, by the way. Royals swept 3 teams in through the AL Central, not the Twins, but 3 other teams, including Cleveland, with Detroit and Kansas City. Said, and the runner on third base scored in that situation. I'd let it drop and hope for a better result. I tend to agree with this. I've wondered about this before, and I think game situation probably plays into this, right? Like if you're up 6-2 in the 9th inning and there's a runner on third and 1 out, you're going to take the out, right? Like you want the out no matter what. If it's a close game in the middle innings and every run is precious, or close game in late innings, like you're up 3-2 in the 8th inning, I might let it drop. I might hope that you could get a better out, take the chance that you're going to get the guy out without letting that runner score, because that run is precious. So I get what he's saying. I've wondered that before. I think sometimes it's hard in the moment to tell someone don't catch a ball. It's something you've been taught your entire life, but I think that is an interesting point, especially in certain game situations. John wants to know, what if the Twins hadn't traded Brent Rooker, who had 39 homers, 112 RBIs for Oakland this year? One of the biggest boneheaded moves ever. Yeah, I do the what if game a lot. Brent Rooker did have a very good year with Oakland. Thing is, he wasn't doing a ton when they traded him. He was part of that trade to San Diego a couple of years ago, where the Twins got back Emilio Pagan and Chris Paddock. They traded Brent Rooker and Taylor Rogers. San Diego moved on from Brent Rooker pretty quick. Kansas City picked him up for a little while, didn't really hang on to him. It wasn't until he got to Oakland in 2023 that he really took off. But since then, he has certainly taken off. 69 homers combined the last 2 years. And yeah, this season, a 927 OPS, a 165 OPS plus. His right-handed bat would have looked very nice in a lineup, especially down the stretch, that had a hard time producing. So yeah, I get it. I get there's frustration when somebody you gave up on, essentially, that you threw into a deal, becomes a good player for somebody else. But it took him more than a year after they got rid of him and 2 previous teams before he got to Oakland outside of Minnesota before he did figure it out. Tom with a little positivity about the Twins. He said, I agree with this reader comment in the Star Tribune Sunday. It's hard to be too bitter on the Pohlads. We would not have a baseball team if they didn't step up when MLB wanted the Twins gone. Yeah, it's a good point. They've been owning this team for 40 years. 2 world championships, those getting a little bit more distant in the time since they won them. But yes, they have been stewards of the game here. They have, they've been owners for 40 years. They've kept baseball in Minnesota, got a stadium built, got a ballpark built. So yes, there are probably a lot of fans like Tom out there who are still very much happy about the Twins, not happy about the way the season ended, but are not the representative minority that you find on social media sometimes that are angry about the way everything is going. Brent says, hi, Michael. I'm happy the Twins did not make a trade at the deadline. I don't want to give up any prospects. It's hard to criticize their lack of trading as we don't know what the asking price was for some of the players that were available. It's a fair point. The thing I would keep coming back to is you didn't have to do a ton, I wouldn't think, to at least get a couple marginal upgrades of relief pitchers. Those don't usually cost a whole lot in terms of investment, things like that. So that's my only quibble. Yeah, I think getting a starting pitcher at the deadline would have cost too much. This is a team that still has to pay attention to draft, development, payroll, things like that. So I get what you're saying, Brent. I just think relief pitching could have come relatively cheap at the deadline. Along those lines, Tom says, not replacing Sonny Gray really hurt this team in 2024. A real low point that contributed to the slide was the September 7th game when Bailey Ober, Twins up 2-0, was replaced after 7 innings, giving up only 1 hit, having retired 15 straight batters. A brilliant start wasted by a bullpen blow-up. Ober's pitch count was only 83 when taken out of the game. He said he felt good and could have worked longer into the game. I agree. We've talked about that. I got a couple other letters along those same lines. So, I think that was a big one. That was a moment this season where if you win that game, maybe things get turned around a little bit. Representative of maybe just some of the moves down the stretch that either were questionable or just backfired. Were just results-based decisions that did not go the Twins' way. And I get everybody's, frustration, everything like that. But that was definitely a moment for the Twins this year that they wish they had back. Couple more. Mark says, good morning, Michael. I really like hearing your take on where we should focus our attention on accountability for a baseball team's poor performance. Of course, ownership owns it, but I suggest fans actually get the blame. The only way to get owners' attention is to stop paying them. Stop buying anything related to the business. Ownership will stick with the business model that provides the best return on investment. It's a business model that works. The fan base can be as upset as they want to be, but they are the problem. I get what he's saying. Kind of vote with your pocketbook, vote with your wallet, kind of like the fan who said earlier, he's not going to any more games if the poll ads are still in charge. Hard to stick with it, though. Optimism starts to return in March. April, you're wanting to get out to a baseball game. You've been stuck inside for 3 or 4 months in the cold of winter. I get it. You can say it now. Can you stick with it when the season comes back in 2025? Last one. I had more of these than I realized. I even skipped over a few that were a little bit repetitive with some other ones. Chris says, love the podcast. I hope this will get me on the air. Love having Vaiku back. Sorry, Keith had to move to Arizona. Lavelle still seems pretty high on the Twins and continues to talk about the big three of Correa, Buxton, and Lewis. But Lewis has a Fangraphs WAR of 1.4. He hasn't been a good hitter in months. Has the league figured him out? Also, next year, Pablo Lopez goes to $18 million, so anything gained by getting rid of Kepler is eaten up right there. I think he might go to $21 million. Between Lopez, Correa, and Buxton, that's a ton of money in salary. I don't understand the nuance of the luxury tax, but that's got to be half the payroll for 3 players. Yeah, that's they were close to it this year. I think they're going to be up there next year, but maybe close to half, if not more than half, for those 3 guys, which means they have to produce. Lopez had a good season. He really turned it on down the stretch. He had a clunker of a start when they needed him the most, but ultimately he was really a good player for them this year. Buxton and Correa, when they were healthy, were really good players too. They just weren't quite healthy enough. If you'd have gotten 20 or 30 more games out of Buxton and Correa, I think this might have been a different season. So thanks for all the letters, you guys. Appreciate it. Maybe next year will be a little bit different. Let's bring in Star Tribune Timberwolves writer Chris Hine right now. I have done my best this offseason to leave him alone, but I can leave you alone no longer, Chris. It is no longer the offseason, and B, around this time last week we got some monumental news with the Timberwolves trading Karl-Anthony Towns to the Knicks, a subject that has been broached many times between the two of us on this podcast is now a reality. So first of all, how's your week been, and what do you think of all this?
Sometimes they like to ease you in off the off season into training camp, and you get a couple nice easy days and things like that, and not this year. Not this year. Not this. Actually, 4 of my 7, I was saying to somebody the other day, or I think I put it on Twitter, 4 of my 7 seasons covering the Wolves have had some sort of weirdness going on.
Oh, sure.
Like preseason, training camp, media day, all that stuff. So, this is nothing new. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind, and we had the introductory press conference this morning at Target Center to introduce the new guys and one returning member in Keita Bates-Diop. Right. And I think the one big takeaway was Julius Randle's very excited to be reunited with Chris Finch. Effusive praise for Finch and their time in New Orleans together, which was I think like 3-4 years ago, maybe. Mm-hmm. And so, if there was ever any doubt that Randle was excited about this trade, I think he pretty much quashed it in the first that 15-minute news conference yesterday.
But let's get to the new guys in a minute. First, just the reaction to Towns, 9-year veteran guy who was drafted number 1 overall in 2015, a cornerstone piece for a long time, and then obviously a co-star with Anthony Edwards, and they certainly started to shift more towards this is Ant's team, even if those guys didn't talk about it that way. I had an inkling that this moment would come at some point. I'm still surprised it came right before training camp. What was your surprise level, and how do you kind of assess his tenure here before we get into what they got back?
Yeah, so I think kind of as you alluded to, this is something that we in the Minneapolis sports market, or you or me or others who cover the Timberwolves, it's something that we've always written about and kind of theorized about, especially in this iteration of the Wolves, the Rudy Gobert iteration of the Wolves. I think we were a little heavier on it after the summer of 2023.
Yes.
Because, they were the 8th seed, they lost in the first round. And so, if you're thinking of ways that you're going to kind of punt on this experiment or reshape the roster, the most logical option always was a Karl trade, because you're not trading Ant. Karl probably, had more trade value all along than Gobert did, given his age and skill set. So we always thought this was possible. I think the timing of it was probably the most surprising thing. If this was going to happen, you would figure it was going to happen in July. It didn't happen in July. And if it's going to happen again, you would think, maybe the trade deadline, if this year doesn't quite go as they hoped. But when you make a run to the Western Conference Finals, you go through free agency and the draft without making a splashy move like this. You think, okay, well, despite the hefty luxury tax bill, they're going to run this back one more year and see what they have. That, we just kind of assumed all summer that was what it was going to be. And then boom, it just kind of happens this way right before training camp begins. When an offer is out there and a team makes the offer, and then the Knicks, the Knicks had always kind of had offers for Towns out there, or at least, let the Wolves know that they were perpetually interested in him.
Yep.
But when they stepped it up to include Dante DiVincenzo in the deal, the Wolves finally really started listening seriously. And that's what happened in the days leading up to that Friday night agreement.
Obviously there's a lot of components that combine to make this trade, right? There's Towns' salary, his supermax kicking in, and how that's going to complicate the books, not just this year, but certainly in future years. There's still the question of fit. There's the question of, some of his playoff performances, although I think he was starting to put some of that to rest, although the Dallas series didn't necessarily help that. And then there's also just the Knicks making an offer that maybe they thought finally brought the right value. How do you if you're kind of scaling those things, what do you think is top of list for why they do this trade?
Number one, and they'll tell you this, is probably Anthony Edwards, and having the flexibility to reshape, remold the roster at various points into the future, short term and into the future, to try to maximize as many years of Anthony Edwards as possible. One thing that I think people probably need to realize about Ant is he's a very competitive person. Mm-hmm. So I think if he's going through the prime of his career in his 20s and he doesn't have a team around him that is competitive every year, or if they go through a period where it's a rebuild, or, you're looking at a 2-year rebuild, or, something like that, right? I think that is the only way in which, maybe Anthony Edwards would get upset.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Makes sense. Yeah.
So I think if you are a franchise and your long-term goal is to build around this guy to quote unquote keep him happy, I think the way to keep Anthony Edwards happy is by being in the playoffs every year and giving him a chance, right? So when you look at Towns' contract and the second apron and the luxury tax, and you're thinking of it in those terms of how do we best maximize Anthony Edwards in his 20s for these next 5 years that we have him under contract, to the point where he's going to want to stay 5 years from now when he is in his late 20s and in the absolute peak of his career. I think that's when you say, okay, well, this is one way to do that. This is one way to gain more flexibility, eventually maybe get under this second apron if they can, do some limboing, around it. And I think that's kind of if I'm kind of ranking the priorities in this trade, that's probably at the top of the list, right?
Yeah.
In terms of it's a longer term outlook, and you are definitely rolling the dice in the short term. I think, as we'll get into, I think you still have a very competitive team. We'll see what it looks like. It's going to be a different team than last year, for sure. But you are rolling the dice that you're not going to maybe quite get to the ceiling that you were last year, which was, if they played better in that Dallas series, potentially a finals team.
Right.
So it's a risk, but it was, to me, it was more of a long-term trade than it was a short-term trade when viewed through the lens of having a franchise player in Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I don't necessarily. Again, we'll get to this in a minute. I don't necessarily think they took much of a step back, if they did at all. I don't know that they took a step back in the short term, because I do think they were already going to be a deeper team this year, right? Just because of some of the moves they had already made, some of, getting Rob Dillingham in here, getting Joe.
Well, I don't know if they thought they were going to be a deeper team. I think they were short on depth, actually.
Really? Okay.
I think so. I think they didn't feel, and that's just kind of what they've been talking about. Whether it's Finch or Connolly the last 2 days, I don't think they thought they had the depth they needed coming into this year. And so building out the depth, and now having a really solidified top 8 the way they did last year, they like that coming into the season. They like having this top 8. It's basically like these 8 guys are going to play. Slots 9 and 10 are kind of up for grabs in the rotation. Finch normally goes 9 deep in the regular season, so somebody will grab that 9th slot, and if he wants to go to 10, that 10th slot. But I think they like having a solidified top 8 like this, and I don't think they thought they had it.
Okay. Towns goes to New York. Obviously, tons of connections there. His former agent, Leon Rose, is running the show over there. Tom Thibodeau, his former coach, is the coach there. Gerson Rosas, the former Timberwolves president, who probably caused one of those weird starts to camp for you that you alluded to earlier, is also over in New York. How do you think he fares there? How do you think the fit is for him?
The fit roster-wise and just looking at it on paper, it makes sense, right? Like they're down a center. They lost Hartenstein in the offseason to the Thunder. Mitchell Robinson is hurt. They are short on height, and if you're going to be asking Randall coming into the season to play small ball 5, I don't know that that's a winning combo for them in New York. So on paper, it fit what they needed. Tibbs likes to play the starters heavy minutes, so they don't apparently need much of a bench, but they have what looks like a really good starting 5 to my eyes. So I think it fits there, and I think the regular season, I think they're going to win a lot of games. Like I think the Knicks will be good, and so I think for the regular season at least, I think it's going to be a kind of a rosy partnership. I think Karl will perform well in the regular season. He's an efficient scorer. I don't foresee him getting any less efficient. But the real question is what's going to happen come April. And that's when the true test of this trade is going to work. I think it'll be fine in the regular season, and I think they'll win a lot of games. I just don't know what's going to happen in the postseason with them, especially if they lose and he struggles or what have you.
How do we assess the fit here now? They bring in Julius Randle, who's under contract this year, then has a player option next year, and I'll get to that in a minute. DiVincenzo, really nice, 6th, 7th, 8th kind of player. Excelled in New York last year, was great for the Warriors a few years ago when they won a championship, just kind of one of those ultimate glue guys. And they've got multiple guys kind of like that on the roster now. He comps a little bit to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but you can never have too many guys quite like that. And then obviously Bates Diop is a little bit more depth. What do you think of how especially Randall fits into this team?
We'll see. I need to see it. I think I just have this vision in my head of Randall kind of being the ball stopping, long two taking guy who, can heat up on a given night for sure. But, Chris Finch seems to be very high on him from his time in New Orleans, likes the fact that he could drive and create open looks from three for this team. I think they need to take a lot more threes than they did. They were in the bottom half of attempts last year. So,
yeah.
I think Randall brings that added dimension where Karl, didn't really. It's another player that could take the ball off the dribble and set up open looks from three, which was not Karl's game.
No.
So obviously Ant can do that as well, but now you have another player that can do that. And they really like Anthony Edwards being a catch and shoot 3-point shooter. That's his strength as a shooter. And so if he can get back to a little bit of that, maybe you make Ant an efficient scorer. So I think that's what they're looking at fit-wise on the offensive end of the floor. I don't anticipate a huge drop-off defensively because of this trade. I actually think their defense and the depth of their defense got a little better because of the addition of DiVincenzo.
Yep.
They were going to be a very good defensive team anyway, but I think they might have even gotten a small uptick on the defensive end of the floor just because now I think they can deploy a lot of different lineups if they want to. We'll see what the starting unit looks like with Randall in there as well. But, they made Towns and Naz Reid, who are not known for being defensive players, into seemingly capable defensive players in the context of how this team operated last year. So I think that's not as big of an issue to me as what's going to happen on the offensive end of the floor. And we're just going to have to see how this fit works. Literally, I think today was their first day of practice. So
yeah, right.
A lot of work to do.
Well, and Randall is a true 4 while they were asking Towns to be a 4, and he had played mostly 5 in his career. Randall, you look at his stats, he's good for about 5 assists a game, at least in his Knicks career. So he's got that skill set, but it might be a different kind of 5 assists than the Wolves usually get, right? Because he's maybe playing a little bit more, like you said, drive and kick than flow of the offense kind of assist. So I think it's going to be that's definitely going to be a work in progress. I like it from the standpoint of the versatility gained, this year and beyond. What I didn't realize, and maybe I should have, maybe this is just my own bias built up over the years, but Cat had a lot of fans here. There was a lot of people who were pretty heartbroken by this.
Well, I think people, regardless of what you feel about Karl-Anthony Towns, the basketball player, I think there was a lot of affinity for Cat, the person.
Yeah.
That even if you disliked his game or were critical of him, I think everybody could recognize that he is seemingly a good dude who was really involved in the community, really repped Minnesota well, wanted to stay here, was loyal to the franchise, wanted to build a winner, got a little taste of success here, at the end of his tenure. So I think even if you are not a fan of his game, I don't think anybody's going to have a bad thing to say about him as a person. That's where I feel like, a lot of the affinity comes from. And, and look, his last season here is a Western Conference Finals appearance, only something that one other team in franchise history has ever done. So he was a part of making history here. And they don't get there without him, specifically his Game 7 against Denver, which I think, is probably his shining moment to me in the Timberwolves uniform, was the way he played in that game. So I think overall, with the success they had last year, it definitely, helped his legacy here, and the fact that he was so active in the community, loved Minnesota. This became home for him. And so I think that's, there's just a lot of personal affinity when something like this happens for somebody who really represented his team and himself so well.
I agree with that. 2 more questions for you, Chris, before we go. One, does the ceiling change at all this year? I still feel like this is a team that should be top 4 in the West and competing to get right back where they were a year ago. That doesn't guarantee that you will. And obviously the results will be judged by themselves. But I still feel like this is a team that in the short term should have the same goals they had even before this trade.
I think that's fair to say, and I think they do. I just don't know the reality of what the situation is going to look like. If you look around the Western Conference, I think the Western Conference is at least coming into the year on paper, a very difficult conference. Oklahoma City seems to be the consensus team to beat for the 1 seed in the regular season. You have Memphis coming back with their guys healthy this year. Denver might have gotten worse, but they still have a 3-time MVP on their roster. You've got Dallas trying to reload a little bit around Luka and Kyrie, and I feel like it's a deep conference, and obviously injuries play a significant part in this, but I do look at the Wolves roster now, and they are built to maybe withstand injuries a little more with the depth that they have. Anthony Edwards tends to play a lot of games, and his continued ascent along with that of Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels, I think ultimately is going to be what sets the ceiling for this team this season, especially Naz and Jaden now that Karl is no longer here. Those guys have to take, I think, a significant step forward if this team wants to, be a 3 seed like they were last year.
I can never look just to the present. I always have to look forward to the future. I'm glad you brought up Naz Reid because, correct me if I'm wrong, but now you have Julius Randle, Naz Reid, and Rudy Gobert all with player options after this year, all of them big men. That sets up a pretty interesting offseason potentially next year or even a trade deadline this year if things aren't going the way you exactly want them to.
It certainly does. Every dynamic is a little different there in terms of where they're at in their careers. Tim Connolly, and I think that also includes where the Wolves can negotiate with them.
Right.
Tim Connolly said that he would like Rudy Gobert to finish his career in Minnesota. We'll see what that entails. Gobert has a hefty player option that if he tears that up, the Wolves still have to make sure they pay him. So that's going to be a hefty price tag, no matter how many years it is. Naz is going to be looking to really cash in for the first time in his career. Yes, he's made, I think about $28-ish million over the last 2 years here. But, this next contract of his is going to be probably his first really big moment to cash in. So we'll see what he commands. And Julius Randle kind of, I'm trying to, I don't want to say rehabilitate his career, but he had an injury-plagued year last year. What's going to happen with him this year? Is it a good fit? If it's not a good fit, what happens then? Do they trade him at the deadline? And if it is a good fit and the Wolves are good, are you going to want to sign him to a long-term deal? So there's a lot of parts here. They did gain the flexibility of, not having Karl's contract on the books, and that's one of the reasons why they made this move. But there's still a lot. It'll be a busy next off season from that perspective for sure.
Yes, it will. It'll be another weird one for you, I'm sure. But for now, we've just got a season ahead of us. Just a few weeks till they tip it off for good, for real. Chris, appreciate it as always. Be well, and we will talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Thank you.
Great stuff from Chris, and a postscript to our discussion. I saw this from Brian Windhorst of ESPN yesterday saying, I was kind of surprised at how many executives I talked to from the NBA who felt like the Timberwolves won this trade. I'm on board with that. I feel like that's the case. I like this trade for the Wolves a lot. Time will tell how well it works out, but I do think this was both a good short-term and medium to long-term deal for them.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
Let's do fantasy football here on Daily Delivery. Michael Rand versus Star Tribune sports editor Ryan Kostecka. We're going to add them up from last week, Ryan, and then we're going to pick 3 more. How do you feel you did last week before we go to the numbers?
I honestly don't think I did very good again. And it's more of a gut feeling than anything. I think I got bit by the Derek Carr bug, so a little nervous with that.
Okay, well, let's add them up. We've got our picks from last week, so let's take a look at those right now. We'll start with quarterbacks. You had Derek Carr. Let's go to the tape here. Not the tape, but let's go to the scoreboard from last week. Derek Carr, still scrolling. That's not a good sign. That's not good. You still scrolling. Derek Carr had 8.06 points. 8.06 points. So
yeah, I got bit by the Derek Carr bug.
So 8.06. I'll give you 8.1. I don't think it's going to come down to that. And then I had Jaden Daniels. He did better. That guy doesn't throw any. Does he throw incompletions? Does he ever throw any incomplete passes? Is that like 2 weeks in a row with 2 incompletions?
It's incredible.
Yeah. So he had 24. So that's a good start for me.
Wow. Yes, it is.
Next up, you had Brandon Ayuk, who I don't remember how he did. How did he do? We're going to find out.
They put up 34, 35 points. The Niners put up a good chunk of points.
Right. But I'm still looking for him here. That's not good.
That's not good, yeah.
Yeah, he's not in the top 25.
I think Kittle. Nope, I think Kittle had a good game. Yeah.
Jordan Jennings. He's classified as a wide receiver, right? I'm looking in the right category.
The slander.
Brandon Ayuk, 6.8. 6.8. There he is. He was the 61st.
I am just.
6.
I'm really going to lose to just your quarterback, aren't I?
It's possible. I had Aaron Jones, revenge game. He was pretty good last week. He wasn't like huge in the scoring, but he was 16th. He had 17.9. He had a solid game. He didn't get in the end zone. That was what I was worried about. Didn't get in the end zone.
Yeah.
But yeah, the gap is widening here. And then you had Dolphins running back, right?
Yeah, Devon Achane.
Let's see. Where's our Dolphin here? Okay. Ryan, I'm still scrolling.
Oh, no.
There we go. 5.9.
Oh, gosh. I hate this.
Yeah,
I hate football so much.
I did beat you with just the quarterback. I'll look at. I was worried because I didn't know really how your guys did. I just knew that DJ Moore, who was my wide receiver, did not have a great game for the Bears, even though the Bears put up some points.
Yeah.
He was way down this week. I think he had I looked this up before. He was maybe like 3.7 or something like that. He was not good.
Welcome to the club.
Keenan Allen. There's Keenan Allen. Okay, DJ Moore. Still scrolling into the. We're almost to 100. We're almost to 100 now for DJ Moore.
Wow.
Where is he? Okay, DJ Moore.
He played, right?
I'm lucky this wasn't closer. I missed him. He had 11.2. He had a touchdown, so he had 11.2. He wasn't as bad as I thought.
Wow.
I must have missed him. I was so ultra upset about it. But see, I had a little over 50. You had about 20. I was. You know what though? It's weird. It's hard to predict. I am 2-0 at this point, but you know what? That's the beauty of Ryan. That's the beauty of fantasy. There's always another week. So I will.
Yes.
This is not a make it take it league. This is the loser gets the ball out. You get the first pick again. Who would you like this week?
Man, because I'm still deciding, I'm gonna go with Amari Cooper.
Okay.
Versus Washington for my first receiver. It's not that I have a lot of faith in Deshaun Watson or even Cleveland. I have on very good knowledge that one of my very good friends, Tony Jones, the Athletic, is a diehard Commanders fan.
Okay.
And he swears they have the worst secondary in the league.
Okay. Yeah, it should be a high-scoring game. They've been in a lot of high-scoring games.
Exactly. That's
a solid pick.
That's my guess. I'm going to try and go a little more conservative in a sense. I just want points at this point.
Okay. I get it. I get what you're saying. I'm going to take Najee Harris.
Ooh,
I'm basically picking anybody who's going against the Dallas run defense. I'm basically like on a one-man crusade against Mike Zimmer right now. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
You were pretty good to us sometimes here in Minnesota, but the run defense has not been generally stout. They've been okay, but yeah, they got run over a couple times. So I'm playing an opponent. Sometimes I like to play the opponent more than I play the back, and he does get to go against the Dallas not so vaunted Dallas run defense this week. It's a little bit of a risky pick, but he's down there in the projections around like 20. So I'm hoping for good things.
I like that pick. He was one of my 3 I thought about. Okay. I mean, like you said, you're going against Dallas. That was the kind of the key for him. I am going to go. I worry
that Pittsburgh is due for like a 3-point game somewhere in here, though.
And that's always the fear, right?
They're a little pumped up right now.
I think I am going to go with. The problem is I like both of my running backs. I'm just not sure if one's going to play.
Okay. Don't pick that guy then. Don't pick the guy who doesn't play.
I'm going to go with Ramondre Stevenson for New England against Miami.
Yep.
I know he's had some issues carrying the ball. Yeah, he's had some issues, some fumbles, but I think he's going to score. I think he's going to get some points. The other option was Brian Robinson going against Cleveland. And I just, Robinson's been hurt. He didn't practice Wednesday, so it's always kind of a red flag.
Yep.
So,
and Miami's in a tough spot with their offense right now.
Yes,
so
they are.
You kind of feel like anybody playing against them could possess the ball for a lot, and that's good for a running back. So
this might be a Drake May game. Who knows? Does Drake May get the rest of the start?
I don't know if we're in the territory for Drake May game yet. I don't know if we're worried about Drake May yet. But okay, I'm going to go wide receiver here. I might anger some Vikings fans here, but I'm going to take Garrett Wilson from the Jets.
Nice. I thought about it. I just couldn't pick against Flores' defense.
Yeah, I think the reason I took him is I think Aaron Rodgers will be motivated against the Vikings. I think B, the kinds of stuff that Rodgers does will work okay-ish, at least against a Flores defense, because he will take what he can get. And Wilson I think Andrew Kramer from our staff was telling me that Wilson was like on the radio this week complaining about the offense, complaining about stuff like his own offense. So sometimes when that happens, they make a concerted effort to get their guy the ball. So I'm gonna and they could, whether they're up early or down early, you could benefit from that. So I'm gonna take him for, hopefully a bunch of catches, and we'll see what he gets from there.
I get the pick. I think the one thing I do worry about is Rodgers did not look good. He looked very immobile, you could say, and that's not exactly where we want to be. So I stayed away from Garrett Wilson. Yeah. Here's our quarterback-wise. You know what? I'm going to take the rook. I'm going Caleb Williams versus Carolina.
Wow. Okay.
I think Caleb has gotten better. Yep. I think it's a good time for them to play. It's against Carolina, one of the worst teams in the league. I do like that. I just, I don't know why. I don't even want to call it a gut feeling. I just think Caleb's getting better. This could be like the game where it's like you're playing a team that's maybe not the best. You're kind of coming out show, you could say.
Okay. I think it's pretty good. That's a solid pick. Reminding everybody of the format, too, going into my last pick, we are allowed a running back, a wide receiver, and a quarterback, and they have to be outside the top 10 of projected scoring in that given week. So with that in mind, my last pick is Matthew Stafford of the Rams. I like the Rams putting up big numbers this week. Now I got to refresh my memory as who's their opponent was. I like the opponent. Again, I'm kind of an opponent picker here. Yeah. They play Green Bay. I was not impressed by the Green Bay pass defense. I know they forced some turnovers, but they looked pretty thoroughly confused by what the Vikings were doing in the first half. They gave up 34 to Jalen Hurts and the Eagles in the first game of the year. So I like Matthew Stafford doing a lot of the same things that Sam Darnold did this past week and putting up some good numbers against Green Bay.
Granted, I'm not in any position to question any move you made considering you're 2-0. I just do want to question is, who is Stafford going to throw to?
I don't care. I don't care. He's fine.
You're ready to suit up out there if needed?
I'll go. I'll go in if I need to, but I don't think that's probably not in his best interest or mine at this point in our. Yeah. We got to. The extent of my suiting up is my 10-year-old daughter had their soccer game this week. The opponent didn't have enough players, so they had to forfeit. They didn't show up. So instead of just calling off the whole night, the coach is like, well, let's try to have a little fun. It's like second to last game of the year. Let's have a parents versus kids kind of scrimmage. Oh, so I got out there. I'm not a soccer player, but I can play a little bit. Okay. And so that's my comfort level. I'm not going into the middle of an NFL game, but I can suit up against some 10U soccer players and do okay.
I think I'm best suited for goalie at that point. I'm a goalie.
I played goalie for half.
Good there.
I played goalie for half the game. Half the game. I gave one of the other guys a chance to get out there and then play the field. But it was fun. It was a ton of fun, as is fantasy football every week. Good luck to you in this game, Ryan, in addition to your other fantasy league. And we'll do it again next week.
Thank you. Sounds good.
I'm 2-0 in fantasy. I'm definitely not 2-0 in my other fantasy league. Haven't been paying enough attention to it. Probably need to do some roster readjustment after the start of the year. Funny thing, too, postscript to Ryan and I doing that segment, which I guess we'll put in the cooler here. Both of us liked Kirk Cousins this week, but of course, it's the Thursday night game. We record the segment on Thursday, but it doesn't go on until Friday's episode. So we've kind of taken the Thursday players out of play. We're like, well, that doesn't seem right, because it comes out Friday. It's not really giving anybody any help if the game has already happened. But obviously, we were both onto something. Kirk Cousins, 509 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Certainly has come a long way since that clunker at the start of the year. Tampa Bay has a historically bad pass defense, so let's not overlook that. Also, let's not overlook their criminally poor clock management at the end of that game, where they couldn't, salt away the game after a Cousins interception around the 2-minute mark. But give him all the credit, give him his flowers. It's Kirk-tober. He's having a huge run right now. The Falcons are 3-2 after that opening disappointing start. I'm curious to see how far this goes for them. The 2 games I've won of theirs, they really should have lost. That Philadelphia game and that Tampa Bay game. So I still think they're living on the edge. All of these 1-score games. I don't miss that. I don't miss that from Kirk Cousins here, but some of you probably do. Lynx tonight, huge game against Connecticut. Reminder that Lavelle Neal III and I talked about that on yesterday's show. You can find that on our YouTube page. You can watch us break that down. Huge Game 3 tonight. Lynx versus Connecticut in Connecticut. Feels like this one's going 5. Lavelle and I talked about that. I talked about that on the radio last night, too, with Henry Lank from WCCO. So check that out as well if you get a chance. Until then, that'll do it for today. I am Michael Rand. I'll be in London this weekend. Come find me if you're out and about, Vikings fans. I'll be there. Get in sometime Saturday, trying to get to a soccer match, going to the Vikings game Sunday, doing a fan meetup Saturday night. Go if you're there, come find us. Fan meetup. We're doing that meetup at the Greenwood Pub around 6 p.m. local time Saturday in London. So come find us. I'm sure there'll be a lot of Vikings fans there. Anyway, that's kind of their official takeover bar headquarters. So come find us. It'll be tons of fun. Looking forward to the trip. I'm hoping to see a lot of Vikings fans out there as well. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Back at it with Royce, I do believe, on Monday. I'll be in London, but I should be able to get with Royce, so we'll see you then.